Canadians could soon pay more for furniture, electronics, and other everyday goods because Trump just announced 50% tariffs on hundreds of Canadian products. Canada was given only 30 days, and that clock is already ticking. The tariffs are scheduled to take effect on August 19th unless Canada and the United States reach an agreement. Although they target Canadian exports, the cost will not remain on the American side of the border. In a deeply connected economy, higher costs can enter the United States and then return to Canada through the products we buy. But who actually pays a tariff? When a covered Canadian product enters the United States, the American importer pays the tariff to the U.S. government. A product with a customs value of $100 could create an additional $50 charge before transportation. Storage and retail costs are included. The American company can absorb the cost, pressure the Canadian supplier to reduce its price, or pass the cost to its customers. That is why American shoppers could be the first to notice higher prices. The tariff lists cover a surprisingly wide range of Canadian goods, including alcohol, dairy products, cement, plywood, clothing, furniture, electronics, plants, produce, honey, hockey sticks, fishing equipment, swimming pools, floating docks, and pet accessories. This does not mean every item will instantly become 50% more expensive. Some companies may absorb part of the tariff. Others may find different suppliers or accept smaller profits. But when Canadian products are difficult to replace, more of the cost is likely to reach the customer. So how could Canadians pay more if the tariff is collected in America? Consider a sheet of Canadian plywood. It may be exported to an American manufacturer, turned into a cabinet or piece of furniture, and then sold back to a Canadian retailer. The American manufacturer has already paid the tariff on the Canadian wood. When that finished product returns to Canada, the higher production cost may be included in the price Canadians pay. The same thing can happen with electronics, machinery, and components that cross the border during production. North American supply chains were built around relatively open trade. A tariff placed in the middle of that system can spread from supplier to factory to retailer until it reaches the final customer. There is also a second risk: retaliation. Prime Minister Mark Carney has said Canada will consider all options if the tariffs take effect. If Canada responds with counter tariffs on American products, Canadian importers would pay those duties at our border and could pass the expense to consumers. Canada has not announced a final retaliatory list, so no specific American product can be declared more expensive yet. But if both countries continue adding tariffs, businesses and consumers on both sides will face higher costs. The damage would not stop at the checkout counter. Canadian exporters could lose American customers because their products would become less competitive. Some may find new markets, but others could reduce production, delay investment, or cut jobs. The tariffs contain important exemptions. Canadian energy, potash, certain fish, and critical minerals are not included. That is significant because the United States depends on Canada for many of these resources, and it reveals where Canada may have leverage. Some analysts argue that Canada should use energy, potash, and critical minerals to force Washington back into negotiations. But restricting essential exports would be an extremely aggressive step. It could hurt American agriculture, energy systems, and technology companies while provoking even more damaging retaliation against Canada. Canadian leaders are already divided over how forcefully the country should respond. Ontario Premier Doug Ford and British Columbia Premier David Eby favor a stronger approach because their provinces face greater exposure. Alberta and Saskatchewan have urged more caution because major exports such as oil and potash remain exempt. The next few weeks will determine whether this remains a temporary threat or becomes a deeper restructuring of the Canadian and American economic relationship. Negotiations could delay or reduce the tariffs. Businesses could find new suppliers, and Canada could respond with targeted measures. But if the tariffs take effect on August 19th, companies at the border will feel the first impact. Factories and workers could feel the next. Then the cost may arrive in American shopping carts before returning to Canadian ones. Trump's tariffs may be aimed at Canada, but tariffs do not remain where politicians place them. They move through supply chains, business contracts, jobs, and consumer prices. Canada was given 30 days. The clock is already ticking. And what happens before August 19th could determine how much Canadians and Americans pay for years to come.